Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is Susie Church Brown. I am here with Hannah for another conversation about Foreign Service kids and university. We have talked about money, we have talked about applications, we have talked about creating a balanced list. Today, we're going to talk about kind of pulling the lens back a little bit. We're going to be talking about applying overseas. And the reason why I personally think this is a really relevant and important topic is because I do think that foreign service kids tend to think about university overseas, so outside of the United States, as a much more viable option than your traditional American applicant. Um, and so we're going to talk a little bit about international applications and what that looks like and how that kind of compares to American applications. And we'll dig right into it. Hannah, how are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me again. So I think the first question is why should we even consider, or a family or student even consider international? And so I'm just going to run through a couple of the pros that I think for looking at schools outside of the United States. So one is just learning about a new culture, a new language. Foreign service kids have exposure to that already, and so continuing that. Another is quality of life. Sometimes people are attracted to lower crime rates potentially in Europe, better weather, sense of adventure. These are all reasons that kids are, or families may be attracted to higher quality of life. They're studying outside the United States gives kids a greater sense of independence. It can help them develop their resilience in a way that studying in the U.S., particularly at small liberal arts colleges, where they can be a little bit coddled through the 4 years. They may not get that same sense of independence. Another benefit to studying international is that there's more direct entry professional programs, and so you could apply directly to professional programs such as business. And the pro of that is that sometimes it can also be shorter completion time because you're applying to a specific major or specific program, you're not doing those liberal arts requirements, and so oftentimes these programs are shorter, and shorter programs can often you can end up cutting costs, so it can be lower cost as well. And then for some international schools, the cost in general, the tuition is less than the tuition in the United States. I always want to give that a caveat because a lot of families do approach me about applying to international schools simply from the cost factor. And I do think it's important that there are hidden costs with international programs. There's the cost of coming home for Thanksgiving. There's costs of housing, which in some parts of Europe have become astronomical. And so I always want to, I just want to make sure that there's not a blanket statement that going international is going to be less expensive than staying in the United States. Another benefit is that actually for employment, a lot of these international schools are part of a big global network and can really be appealing to employers. The fact that a student has studied in London or in Canada is actually kind of it's signaling to employers that the student does have a desire to learn, adventurous spirit, independent, resilience. And then there's also a lot of recruiting that can happen even from American companies at these international schools. For example, I've had kids say like, oh, I'm nervous to go to Canada, right? I'm worried about getting employed in the US after going to Canada. And every Canadian admissions officer I've spoken to, they say that all the major tech companies, all the major employers are coming to these Canadian universities and recruiting heavily. And then finally, something that's emphasized at international schools more so than at, I think, tend to be a bigger emphasis in international versus schools in stateside is this idea of co-ops, or the idea of like working within your education. And so Canada is really well known for their co-op programs where you actually spend a semester or longer or sometimes shorter working in the workforce. And then in the UK, they have something called a sandwich year or a placement year, which is similar, where you get to work directly in your field. So this is something that some schools in the US are starting to adopt, but is really, I think, quite an advantage of attending school internationally, is the idea that you are getting college credit to actually get work experience that can oftentimes turns into an employment opportunity.
So how is that different than an internship? Because I think American universities do tend to like embrace internships.
Yeah, so a co-op, or like the sandwich year, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, is you're actually getting college credit to be working at potentially an engineering firm. I think another like appeal to these programs, and maybe a little different than an internship, is that these universities have really strong relationships with employers, because they're setting you up into these co-op programs, where a college may say, like, this summer you should get an engineering internship. These co-ops are being set up and facilitated by the universities. And then the coursework after your co-op experience, now all these kids come back in from their co-op year and they have real life experience that they can then bring into their class discussions.
So that's a much more well-rounded sort of an experience.
Yeah, and there are co-op programs in the United States. Northeastern's famous for having a strong one, University of Cincinnati. And so if you're listening to this, you're like, oh, this is appealing. I would definitely explore the co-op programs in the United States, but that is something that Canada, the co-op program is extremely well renowned. And then in the UK, you have this thing called a sandwich or replacement year.
Okay.
Okay, so what type of kid is going to do well in an international system, or applying to international schools? So I do think that not all kids are ready to go to school outside of the United States. I think thinking about your kid, are they mature? Are they self-sufficient? Are they responsible, independent? The reputation of these schools in Europe and Canada is they're not providing the wraparound services that a school in the United States may apply. Is the kid capable of finding a dentist on their own? Things like that. I've heard people say that in the UK, you're a professional student. And so it's almost, they see going to college, like we see it as an extension potentially of high school, but actually like in the UK, they see it as like your profession as being a student. And it's a very different mindset than a kid who's attending college in the United States, where the school is providing potentially a slew of services to that student.
And that's not to say that, like I know some kids that are attending university in the Netherlands, so what I'm saying is going to apply for that sort of situation for sure. But I imagine this applies across the board for other international sorts of universities, in that the school does not have housing per se, but they have agreements with housing situations nearby the school. And so then they help facilitate like roommate situations, and they help sort of organize that housing, but it is like not a part of the university at all. Whereas stateside, your housing is on campus. It is a college function, a university function, in order to provide that housing and the board.
Yeah. And I do want to like not be careful generalizing for all of Europe or all of Canada with the housing, because there are schools that offer housing. I think that is one thing. We could talk about this as well. Like, there is a housing crisis in parts of Europe. In Netherlands, there's a housing crisis. And so that is something to be very wary of when you're applying to these universities, just making sure that that student will be able to get housing. What else? An academically motivated student, similar along the idea of being independent and responsible. Kids are there's not the same like advising system as that you may find in the United States. And so you want a kid who's able to be pretty self-motivated, healthy physically and mentally. It's always harder to have a health crisis when you're far from the States. And then as foreign service kids know, or expat kids know, like that spirit of adventure and being able to be flexible, because it'll be a new experience.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about the programs, and I know we'll get into this a little bit more, but there are liberal arts types of schools overseas as well, which would obviously offer the sort of quote unquote well-rounded student experience that a kid would have. stateside. But then you also have the sorts of programs that are more specific, as you said, tailored towards giving you the professional program. So you are going to be studying only business for 3 years, and you're going to graduate with your degree in your specific business field. So this is sort of a long-winded way to get to the question, but the advisor situation maybe isn't missing as much in those sorts of like created programs, because it's already like, these are your classes that you will take from A to B to C to D. Whereas in liberal arts, there's so many more variables and options and opportunities to explore. So I guess the personality of the student would really need to be able to really think about what type of program appeals to them.
Yeah. And I think this segues perfectly. Let's talk about the different ways that a kid can study internationally. So we talked about why international is appealing. We've talked about the type of kid who thrives in that setting. Okay, so how can my kids study internationally? And there's a lot of different options for doing it. So I'm going to go through like the 5 buckets that I think of. So the first would be studying at an American university in Europe. And this is where you're going to get a little bit more of that almost liberal arts education feel. There's going to be a little more hand-holding. There'll be that dorm life feel to it. And so that's kind of, those are American universities that are located in Europe. The second would be to enroll directly into an English-speaking university system. So that would be the ones that are like stand out the most are Canada, UK, and the Netherlands. You're gonna see less English-speaking programs in countries like France or Spain, and that's because if you think about the size of Netherlands, and they have this really robust university system, but the population of Netherlands can't sustain this robust university system. They have to recruit other students into the Netherlands to attend. And so most of their programs are English speaking. France or Spain don't have that same issue. And so there's less English speaking programs. There are American universities in France and Spain, but that's different than an English speaking university system, national university system. Joint degree programs. So these are the options of 2 years at a European university, then 2 years in an American university. And there's a lot of partnerships between American universities and European universities. And that's an interesting option for kids to allow them to get both the taste of the American system and the European system. Then there's schools that are now doing a first year international program. So Northeastern starting to offer that to kids, UNC Chapel Hill is. And so you get your acceptance, but your first year is going to be in Dublin. And then finally, study abroad is a great option. So I am going to expand, I think the first thing is to talk to your kids, like which of these 5 options, if you're trying to get international, which one fits best with your personality? And are we looking for more of that American style system? Like Susie was talking about, where you are having that dorm life, more of a strong advising system, or are you ready to go straight in to like a pre-professional program in the UK or the Netherlands or Canada? I'd like to now talk about like the different programs in Canada, the UK, and Netherlands, and kind of the differences between them.
Excellent.
Okay. So let's talk about Canada first. So Canada is really interesting. Unlike the United States, it's almost entirely a public system. And so it has a lot of government oversight. There's 97 public institutions and then 10 to 15 private. So kind of almost the flip of what we have in the United States. Huge pro to studying in Canada is the tuition is really accessible. It's a much lower tuition rate than we see in the United States. Living expenses can be less as well, depending on the location. And then Canada has public health care. And so health insurance is a plus. People talk about going to school in Canada as having really high quality of life, tends to, I guess, if you're not scared of the cold, but they have a strong social safety net. You have can be in some ways more affordable. Another pro to studying in Canada is that the study permit allows students to work. Usually that's a limited numbers of hours during the school year and then more full-time during the summer. As I discussed earlier, Canada has those co-op programs. so that allows you to have a year of work experience. Sometimes these programs are 5 years, but it gives you that year of work experience within the university. As of now, and the space Canada is changing, very dynamic right now. They give you, after you graduate, they give you a 3-year postgraduate work permit, and so you can actually stay in Canada and work.
Oh, nice.
I don't want to get into this, but the politics in Canada are changing, and they are limiting their the amount of international students they're accepting into the university system right now. And so I think this is like a very dynamic time. So just make sure you fact check me on that. Another appeal to Canada is it's very diverse and multicultural. They pride themselves on recruiting from all over the world. And so you're going to have a really like interesting university experience. Canadian schools are not going to be that quintessential like sporty or Greek life college experience. Very academically focused within the university experience. And then dual citizenship, which some of our kids are lucky enough to have. You get that lower price tag. And I think that's it. Do you have questions specifically about Canada?
So I'm remembering, we had a discussion when my eldest was considering applying, and we had looked at Canada, and I'm trying to remember the application process. I think it was very similar to the American application process.
Yeah, and I'm going to go more into applications at the end. Yeah. Okay. United Kingdom. So UK has the reputation of a world-class education. You have Cambridge, you have Oxford. We can all name several schools in the UK. They have more than 130 universities. You have that kind of prestige, I think, about going to school in the UK. It's an awesome place to explore the rest of Europe. An appeal to the UK to go into school in the UK is that you specialize really early. Most programs in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland are 3 years. Scotland, it's 4 years, but you specialize early. You get into your program and you're done in 3 years. The cost of going to school in the UK is pretty similar to like an out-of-state public university in the United States, but you're going for 3 rather than 4 years. And so that's where the cost saving comes in. You work while you have the opportunity, as in Canada, to work while you study. And then the only one caveat with the UK is if you're a dual citizen, you don't get a lower price on your tuition. You actually need to have lived in the UK before applying. And so if you're a dual citizenship, you are going to be, and you're not living in the UK before you apply, you're going to be paying that international rate, which is different than Canada.
Our good friends in our last country, they were both UK citizens, and they had to go back and live in the UK in order to get that in country.
So that's very important for expat kids to know. But Canada, you can have never lived in Canada and you get that in-state tuition. So very different. Okay, Netherlands. So some of you may be wondering, why is Netherlands thrown in here with the UK and Canada? Again, Netherlands has a very robust English-speaking university system. And so they are very, very, very welcoming to international students. Again, you're going to have a very diverse student population. The Netherlands is a safe and welcoming environment. You can get all around Europe. The Netherlands is divided into like 2 different types of universities. So there's research universities. There's 14 of them. These are 3-year programs: liberal arts, sciences, medicine, law. And then there's 40 universities of applied science. These are 4-year programs. And these are programs that require internship and work experience as part of the degree. You choose within the Netherlands, you choose what you're going to study at the beginning. And then similar to what Susie was talking about some of these European universities developing a liberal arts college system, the Netherlands is developing it is developed, but it's recent history, liberal arts colleges across the country. So there's 13 liberal arts colleges across the country that are part of the research universities, but they foster kind of a more liberal arts environment. The Netherlands is a very affordable option. You can work while you study, and you get a orientation year to live and work in Netherlands after you graduate. I think my one caveat on the Netherlands is it's been in the news a lot for budget issues. They've talked about limiting their English language programs. I was just on a webinar where someone from UCR was trying to ease some of the worries about this with counselors. It seems that the only real change in the Netherlands right now is that they're not going to be expanding their English language programs, and they've eliminated their English language medicine programs. But besides that, these are more political stuff is kind of in a gridlock, and so they're not expecting a huge amount of change.
So I know that we're really focusing on these three international areas to focus, but there are English language programs in other countries as well. For example, South Africa, I know, has some strong programs, especially for sciences. And then I know Australia has a lot of phenomenal programs, but we don't want to sit here and talk at you for 2+ hours. So we're not going to talk about every country that has these sorts of opportunities. But I do hope that if your child is interested and they are flexible in what their university experience looks like, I mean, there are so many other opportunities to explore beyond universities in the United States. But let's talk about, we've hit on this a little bit on each general umbrella of programs, but let's talk a little bit about affordability.
Yeah, so 529 plans that you have saved for your kids maybe can be used to study internationally. You usually can still get your federal loans from FAFSA to pay for an international education. There are some schools that offer merit scholarships for international students, and that varies by institution. Europe has the study permit, so kids can work 20 hours per week during the school year and 40 hours per week over the summer. One thing I caution parents is that unlike in America, tuition really varies by major. And so looking at what major you're, when you're budgeting, looking at what major your kid is applying to. Affordability changes based on exchange rate. And so a college that may seem, that is something that is going to vary or be more dynamic than if you attend in the United States. And then of course, don't forget to take into account the cost of plane tickets or, God forbid, a medevac. And then cost of living, some of these European cities, London, Amsterdam, it's just the cost of living is really astronomical right now, and particularly with these housing prices. So when you're budgeting, making sure you're including that. Should we talk about applying?
Let's talk about applying.
Okay, so let's go. We're going to go through Canada, UK, Netherlands. So Canada, it's an online application. It's mostly decentralized, meaning you're going to apply directly to each school, with the exception of Ontario and British Columbia. They have their own systems. So unlike the US, where you apply to a common app, you're going to be applying directly to institutions. You apply to faculties, or like they call it faculties in Canada, but you apply to a degree, but not a majorment, not a major. Canadian institutions are mostly only looking at junior and senior year grades. Unlike applying to American schools, it is not a holistic application. They may ask a few questions, maybe an essay that's 100 to 200 words, but really they're looking at grades and scores. Very, very different than the United States, where when you're applying in the United States, they're looking at essays and extracurriculars and letters of rec. One thing that can be stressful about applying to Canada is their timeline is a bit behind the United States. And this can be very stressful if you're applying in the US with that May 1 decision deadline. And so that's something to be aware of when applying to Canadian universities, making sure you understand the deadline and get those applications in early.
So the timeline is behind the United States, but they still start at the same time.
They still start, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So acceptances can go out late, and that can be very stressful for a kid whose dream school is University of Toronto, but they have to give a decision to another school in the United States.
And can you, and this might be like trying to like play the field here, but can you like do an early decision with a US school?
No.
And so you
No.
cannot. Okay.
Yeah.
Just asking the question that you guys are all wondering. All right.
Testing policies vary by school and degree, so I can't go ahead and tell you like Canadian schools, require SATs. That's something that varies by school and then by faculty within the school.
Do your IB scores matter? I
Yes.
mean, like, would you
Predicted scores.
predicted scores, but not contingent on your final score?
So the UK is big on the contingencies. Let me get back on that.
Okay.
Yes.
So what I mean
I just
by
don't
that-
want to generalize for I don't want to generalize for the whole system and say, I need to make sure let me get back on that, on the predicted scores for Canada.
if for those of you who might not be familiar, your teachers, your students' teachers will come into agreement mid-junior-ish year and have predicted scores for your student to use as they're applying for university. And for different, like for the US, oftentimes this predicted scores is sufficient for them to provide an acceptance or not, as the case may be. But for certain schools, like for example, there are some in UK and there are some specific program that may require a particular final grade. So they would contingency accept your child based on the provision that they do get, score of whatever. Maybe it's 28, maybe it's 29, maybe it's, I don't know. But so that means basically like if they don't get that final score, then they may not be able to be participating in that program, which is a teensy bit of stress on those IB exams.
Yeah. And so, yes, Canada definitely there are Canadian universities that will give you offers contingent on predicted scores. I'm just being cautious about generalizing for the system as a whole, because I think it really does vary by faculty and university. And you could have an SAT score that qualifies you.
Okay.
All right, UK. So UK uses the UCAS system. This is a direct online application. It's the main system universities use. You can only apply to 5 universities, and that is university and degree program. So you're applying directly to a university and you're selecting the degree program. The deadline just for Oxbridge is October 15th, so it's earlier. And so just making sure students are aware of that. Most universities are rolling besides Oxbridge, and so we do recommend that kids apply early. UK schools do have a personal statement that's sent to all schools. This focuses on what a student wants to study and how they've prepared for this course of study. It's very different than the personal narrative that is sent through the Common App. A personal statement through the UK schools, you're showing, if I want to be an engineer, this is all that I have done. Almost more like a cover letter, like when applying for a job, that I've done to show you that I'm ready for this engineering career. When they're looking at admissions, they're looking at standardized testing, as well as your GPA. You can pick, so they're looking for a certain level that you've reached with standardized testing. Oftentimes there's choices between using AP or IB exams. I just wrote down this example, University of Leeds. They say like, you can have an ACT score of 27 plus 2 AP scores of a 4 or higher, or you can have an SAT score of 1290 plus 2 APs of a 4 or higher, or you could just have 3 AP scores of a 4 or higher.
Wow.
Yeah. So 3 different ways that you can get accepted into the University of Leeds. And what huge advantage of AP versus IB, kind of to what Susie was saying before, is you could take those 3 AP scores, 3 classes your junior year, and have the scores, and it takes some of that uncertainty out of the conditional offer based on IB tests, which you will not get till the summer.
Yep.
And then back to the Leeds example, if you're going to apply to medical, so that's Leeds, but oh wait, if you're applying to medical, guess what? You need 3 APs out of 5. So just to give you a sense of like how you have to deep dive into like what the testing requirements are. IB predicted scores are used as well, but again, then you're waiting till the summer to get your final admission. You get what was called a conditional admission, and so you will be accepted contingent on what your IB scores are.
this may be a weird question, but what if, so of the 5 universities you want to apply to, 4 of which you're going to be applying to pre-med, right? And then one, for whatever reason, you want to apply to their theater program.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
Yeah, but your personal statement is gonna be sent to all the schools.
Okay.
And so that's kind of, they're really encouraging like a pre-professional approach. Whereas I literally have students applying to America that say like, if I go to this school, I want to be an engineer, but if I go to this school, I want to do something different, right? And so it's a very, very, very different approach. In the UK, they want to see a commitment to a profession. They want to see that in your coursework. They want to see that in your personal statement. That is really, really important.
And hats off to an 18-year-old that knows what they want to be when they grow up.
100%. And can handle the stress of admission being based on, a couple test scores.
Yeah.
Okay, so Netherlands has that binary system with the applied sciences universities and the research universities. It's decentralized, so you apply to the universities. You register in StudyLink. You're going to choose 4 programs to apply to, and then you receive the links to complete the applications. Deadlines are usually between December 1st and May 1st. Apply early. It's rolling. It's advantageous to apply early. In Netherlands, you have the fixed number programs. These are the really selective programs. For example, medicine. And for these, you can only apply to 2. So you can only apply to 2 fixed number programs. And if you're applying to medicine, you apply to 1. Admission is based on the diplomacy equivalencies. Usually a specific GPA, your AP coursework. The University of Applied Sciences, again, this is a binary system. The applied sciences don't need AP exams, but it really varies. This is where you want to deep dive into programs and requirements for the universities. All right.
That's a lot of numbers and information that we've just thrown at you.
I wish I could give you a slide deck.
But I think what this underscores is there are so many options out there, not just those in the United States, but as you're looking at these different sorts of international options, they look at students differently, but students also need to be prepared in a different way. And if they're applying for, one of the liberal arts options that is, in the Netherlands or whatever, it would be much more similar to applying to an American university. But if they're applying to a more specific professional program, then there are these other considerations, the score considerations, the limitations on the number of programs that you can apply to, potential contingency acceptances based on exams. But also, I think it's important to underscore the kinds of students that do really well in these kinds of programs, especially the professional development programs. Like, they know what they want to do, which not all 18-year-olds are ready for that sort of thing. And potentially there would be, again, depending, and as Hannah has said multiple times, we don't want to put all of the schools into one basket, but potentially there would be less of a dorm life, campus life sort of experience. There isn't that sort of hand-holding that one might find in a more traditional American university, which maybe is exactly what your child would flourish in. So it's really important for your son or daughter to really try and be as self-reflective as they can be, and just consider what it is they want in their university experience.
I love the idea of asking the question, like, is my kid ready to be a professional student? Because that I think that is a good way to think about what it's like to launch into the Canadian or European system.
No, it's true, because it's a totally different outlook than what sort of, and not to say at all that, a kid at an American university is just playing around. Not at all, but it's just a different sort of an experience in lifestyle than one would have at university in the UK, Canada, or the Netherlands. I mean, we've thrown a lot of information, and so hopefully this is inspiring you to either do a lot of research or just cross those off your list, or maybe add them to your list. We will have more information to share soon, and we thank you so much for listening. Any last thoughts, Hannah?
No, feel free to reach out with any questions.
Thanks so much for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.